They began ministering in the Alabama Black Belt region in the 1930s, before the Civil Rights Movement began. And they've been caring for people in one of the poorest areas of the country ever since. Tonight we'll learn what drives them to care for the least, the lost, and the lonely. So please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa and welcome to EWTN Live, our chance to bring you guests from all over. And our guest tonight is following the mission of the patron of his order, St. Edmund, to bring God's love and provision to an historic area of Alabama just about 2 hours south of us here at EWTN, near Selma. That was about 50 years ago that was the epicenter of the Civil Rights Movement. But even today, this Black Belt region continues to be one of the poorest areas of the country, which is why the Edmundites, as they're known, set up a mission there. To tell us all about it, please welcome the director of the Edmundite missions, Father Richard Myhalyk. Father Richard,
happy to be here.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Now, I have a lot of questions to ask you. One of them is, who are the Edmundites? Tell us a little bit about the founding of the Edmundites.
Well, the Edmundites are an order that goes back to France in the middle of the 1800s. Our patron, St. Edmund of Canterbury, actually, we are a French order, but our patron is an English saint. So Edmund happens to be buried in the Abbey Church, a Cistercian Abbey Church, there, which is where we were founded in France back in the 1800s.
Yeah, Pontigny?
In Pontigny.
Yeah.
And the abbey was abandoned or in ruins at the end of the French Revolution, when much of the church was in shambles, and the elder daughter of the church, as France was called, was very much in shambles as a result of the revolution.
And just so that folks know, it was in shambles because the revolutionaries trashed things of the church.
Right, and because people were so alienated from the church, our founder, John Baptiste Mouard, and our also founder, Father Pierre Boyer, had it in their mind that it was important to try to bring back to the faith, to re-evangelize people who felt estranged from the church. And for the first 30, 40 years of our existence, right up until the 1900s, we were in France, and we gradually expanded. We were at Mont Saint-Michel for a time.
Yeah, that was another abandoned place, and y'all went over there to revive it.
One of our first 7 members was made a bishop of that diocese in that area, and so we were invited. And it was fortuitous that we went into that diocese because in 1900 or thereabouts, when so much of the French government was outlawing religious life and confiscating property, the Edmundites, because we had gone into a second diocese, had by that time become a pontifical congregation in the church. And so we could survive because we literally were not dependent upon remaining in a diocese. So we were scattered to many places in the wind. One of them turned out to be north of Vermont in Montreal because of the French-speaking province there. And our French-speaking fathers at the time were invited into Vermont by the Bishop de Gosbrian at the time to work with French-speaking Catholics in northern Vermont.
And just so that people understand, you know, the French government back in the 1790s had this strong anti-Catholic. They wanted to destroy anything Catholic. But then again in 1900, there was a secular movement within the French government. And
Right.
it wasn't just your religious order, but other religious orders.
It was widespread. In fact, when we were at Mont Saint-Michel, one of the reasons that the statue of Michael, the archangel, is on top of Mont Saint-Michel is the French government forbade crosses to be on top. So we were kind of manipulative or instrumental in getting...
I wouldn't call that manipulative. That's clever. That's clever.
Well, it's survival. And I would say our history is very much a story of what seems at times to be bad news to turn out to be good news. And a good example of that is how while we lost much of what we had in France and were forced to leave that country, ultimately our rebirth and our survival has been very much a transition from being primarily an original French community into being virtually all of our members now, except for a few, one Frenchman and one from Venezuela, we are now an American order, mainly because of our roots with St. Michael's College in Colchester, Vermont.
Now, so you have a college in Colchester, Vermont, named St. Michael's. Did you name it after Mont Saint-Michel?
Yes. We were, if you were to look at our history in France, you would see that we were at a place called Château-Grancier. I'm not sure, I hope I don't offend your French audience with my pronunciation. It's terrible. But we were there, and at Château-Grancier, one of the stained glass windows that is there is, it has Quis ut Deus with Michael the Archangel at the top.
And Quis est Deus means?
Who is like God.
Which is the meaning of Michael in Hebrew.
Right. And so having founded or having served there in France in these educational institutions, we were always very strong with working with education and youth. And in fact, even today in Alabama, besides trying to feed, clothe, and shelter and evangelize the poor, education is one of the strong points of where we believe we can make the greatest impact in helping to alleviate poverty long term. But having been in France at this place where Michael the Archangel's stained glass window exists, when our men came to the United States, pictured in the stained glass window under Michael the Archangel is one of our priests, Father Preval, giving out communion to one of the students at Château-Grancier, the College of the Immaculate Conception there. And he ends up becoming not only the first president of St. Michael's College, but also the first director of St. Anne's Shrine, which is a shrine on Lake Champlain that dates back to the early history and foundation of the founding of Lake Champlain. They just recently celebrated their 400th anniversary of the founding of a fort in honor of St. Anne, which is a very, St. Anne is a great devotion in the French country because of her role. And for many years, we have had a shrine. In fact, our early foundation in Vermont, our early members suffered a great deal because of the severe winters that go on in Vermont. Edmundites have, usually we end up shifting between the deep south, where we roast in the summer, to freezing in the winter in Vermont. And
this doesn't have anything to do...
No, it has nothing. I'm not bitter about being transferred back and forth, but it is quite an adjustment. And
I was just wondering if this had anything to do with Dante's sense of hell as having a really hot place and a really cold place.
Well, I've learned there are certain advantages to the South.
Yeah.
And one of them is our pace of life here in the South is much more laid back and relaxed.
Yes, it is.
And I joke sometimes because we do, when you work with the poor and especially trying to make some progress, which seems interminable, I always say we have two speeds here, slow and stop. Mm-hmm. But that's because the heat. And today, coming to the studio when we had a torrential downpour, and all I could think of is what we went through not too long ago with the tornadoes going through Alabama that caused so much devastation in that. But our history early on was very much tied with circumstances brought us to Vermont. Ultimately, we in the 20s, we went through another crisis. We were originally in the 20s out in Montana and places like that, working with Native Americans. And we went through a time when our very survival was at question. And again, we kind of pulled back. Fortunately, the men who were stationed at our college in Vermont persevered and petitioned to allow to continue on. Not only did it continue on, but as a result of the faith of these men, one of our men early on in the 30s and 40s, Father Lorenzo D'Agostino, was very instrumental in the woolen mills back up in Winooski.
Winooski is where?
Winooski is an Indian word for onion.
Okay.
Originally, our college was in Winooski Park, and suddenly the post office changed to Colchester, and people got the impression that we moved the college. We didn't move the college.
They just changed the name of the town.
They just changed the name to Colchester, I guess. But Winooski was a mill town, and this Edmundite priest was very instrumental back in the 30s. He became a psychology teacher at our college and was very much instrumental in being involved with the child and women's labor laws. That so many of the mills were being staffed by children and women, and hardly any pay. And he went to bed. So we've had a history even before we came to Alabama in the 30s of having a real strong social justice commitment.
Right.
And
so, like, for example, working with the people that worked in the mills, that was one way in which they were able to do social justice to it because it was so oppressive. Then you came down to Alabama.
Yes, we came down to Alabama in the 1937. Pope Pius XI wrote really it turned out, I would think it went to every community in the United States, probably. It was a general kind of memorandum that he sent out as the Holy Father, and he was quite concerned that the Catholic Church was not sufficiently present in the Deep South, especially among people of color, or he used the term colored people at the time, which was the way we referred to blacks or African Americans. And his concern was that as he looked at the history of the church, if you go back and a Benedictine priest by the name of Father Cyprian Davis has a wonderful book on black Catholics in the United States, you would find that long ago, in slavery time, when one of the first bishops reported the history of the profile of his diocese to the Holy Father, he reported that 20% of the population that were Catholic were blacks. And so the Pope was quite concerned that the Catholic Church was not sufficiently present among black people in the Deep South. So our community got the letter, and Father Victor Nicol, who was the Superior General of our community at our college in Vermont, brought it to his council. Now, most of my community had never been south of New Jersey. And if you're looking at the racial makeup of the United States, Vermont is not a particularly black state.
Right.
It's probably the second whitest state in the United States. So here is a group of people who have probably rarely seen a black person, let alone interact with them, suddenly coming to Selma, Alabama, which is predominantly black. The Black Belt is really not called the Black Belt because of so many African Americans or black people, but because of the rich soil that help grow cotton and other crops here in the Deep South. But our men came, Father Francis Casey and John Perro, and they came in the July of 37. We're about to celebrate next July our 75th anniversary as a mission. And they came to Selma because of Archbishop Thomas Tulin, and it was selected as a place that was probably where we could make the most impact because the need seemed to be greatest. At the beginning of the program, you mentioned how it was a particularly poor area. It has, for the last 100 years, the area in which the Edmundite missions exists has been listed, the counties that we're in, 4 counties in Alabama, the 4 counties that we're currently in have been listed among the 100 poorest counties in the United States for the last 100 years. And so we went there in 37. Our original intention was do what the Holy Father said. We want to evangelize. We want to bring into the Roman Catholic Church people who are not Catholic. And the presumption was these people are completely unchurched. Well, that's not the case.
People are very much part of the church life.
In fact, if you read Pope Paul VI, Evangelium Nuntiandi, which is a wonderful papal document on evangelization, you realize very quickly that Pope Paul VI had put his finger on the secret to evangelization is allowing the evangelization to really invite into your life. If the church wants to be an evangelizer, it first begins by being evangelized itself. How? Why? Well, in a sense, what happens is we go in and we begin to identify with what the people are struggling with, their stories, their life struggle. And you realize very quickly that they have a strong faith. You know, many of the black people that I interact with and our tremendous sisters and lay staff that interact with in outreach efforts, they discover very quickly how solid these people are in their perception of God and God's remarkable presence in their lives and confidence that God will somehow see them through. And I'd like to say that I'm as optimistic as they are. Many times I find myself appreciating Pope Paul VI's Evangelium Nuntiandi because of that, you know, the culture, the customs, the faith, the hope, the love that they have is something which is a tremendous gift that is given to the church. And part of our mission when we, through the renewal process as a community, articulated what we hope to do in the church today was to help people, again, bring them into full partnership, full participation in the church, help them realize they're a vital part of what makes the church be the living body of Christ. When I was a student at St. Michael's College, I was a chemistry student, and I discovered my vocation to be an Edmundite because I burned tear gas by mistake in the lab. And the head of the chemistry
department... How did that lead to a vocation?
Well,
that would
the head of the department said, Myhalyk, you better be a priest because you're never going to make it as a chemist. But the reality was that here I was as a junior, and Morris Willett, Father Morris Willett, an Edmundite priest who was very much engaged in the civil rights struggle in Selma in the 60s, came to St. Michael's when I was a junior, and he stood up in the sanctuary of what was then the just newly built consecrated chapel to St. Michael the Archangel on our campus. And Father Morris said, Bloody Sunday had just occurred in Selma, which was a tragic event in which there's still many retellings of that. And each year we have the annual Jubilee that recounts it, relives it, remembers it. And Morris...
And just so people, a lot of people don't remember Bloody Sunday, but that was when there was going to be a march from Selma to the
Montgomery.
State capital, to Montgomery.
Right. And as they crossed the bridge, they were met with troopers that clubbed them and beat them. And at the time, we had Good Samaritan Hospital, which was a black hospital that the Edmundites helped fund to keep open. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Rochester, New York, who have worked closely with the Edmundites almost from the very beginning in our southern missions. I'm a product of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Rochester, New York. My hometown diocese is, I'm from Elmira, New York originally, and the Diocese of Rochester. The sisters were very much instrumental in my religious formation as a young person. And those sisters were working in Good Samaritan Hospital, and at the time, the church was very uneasy about our religious involvement because they thought we should be stand back somewhat, and
that it might have been too political,
that it was not
or
part of the mission of the church. To put it in a context, when Vatican II will issue the Church in the Modern World, the Gaudium and Spes document, the opening lines of that, I believe my community, the Edmundite community, really stands for. In fact, even today, St. Michael's College, if it has a distinctive niche as a college, it is its mobilization of volunteer efforts, its justice and peace program. That whole frame is situated around the opening lines of Gaudium and Spes, which are basically the joys and hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the poor and of those who are deeply troubled, are the joys and the hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the disciples of Christ. In other words, what's the most important thing why did the Edmundites come into existence? We came into existence in order to make people feel they could come and feel a part of be part of the church again, and to feel really that they were counted, that they had moved from what St. Paul describes as strangers and aliens to full citizens, and that their gifts and their talents. And so when I look around our history and I recall some of the moments, whether they're something that happened in Mobile, Alabama, for many years, the current pastor and superior of the Southern House, which is Father Michael Jacques in New Orleans, who was very much part of rebuilding of the whole archdiocese's parish structure there after Katrina. That whole movement that he's involved with now, he had started when he was still a brother in the community, working with Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of Mobile. He had started a program which was a version of Cursillo for youth. And we used Visitation Monastery for many years. And today, some of the people who are vocations in the church, both lay and clergy and religious, are products of that program. The director
What's the program called?
It was called Christian Encounter. And the Christian Encounter program that Father Michael, then Brother Michael, conducted, a young man by the name of Andy Wynn, is the director of St. Mary's Children's Home in Mobile. The director of Catholic Charities for Yakima, Washington is John Young, and he and his wife are a product of that program. Andy's wife is, most of our programs always seem to get people to marry. We had for 10 or 12 years a mission corps that was wonderful in engaging young people in right out of college, sort of like the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, tapping their energy, their enthusiasm for giving their gifts and challenges to the church. So the Edmundites have been very much a community that has always relied heavily upon bringing others into full partnership. And as we grew in so much so that in the 50s, in 1954, I believe it was, Alice Enders, who was a Roman Catholic, she had originally purchased property that I think goes back to the Sisters of Charity, or a religious community back in her time. She donated just before her death, a couple weeks before her death, the property that now it served for many years as our place of formation, and as her will has was expressed to us near the end of her life. She wanted it to always be used for formative purposes. And Enders Island, even today, is used as a place where people can come. We have a wonderful sacred art program. It's called the St. Michael's Sacred Art Institute. And they have icon painting, illuminations. We have some wonderful people that are pulled in from all over the United States to do a wonderful sacred art program, retreats, etc. In the 60s, because of, again, our gradual increase in vocations, this time, again, one of the popes happened to be John the 23rd. John the 23rd was quite concerned about the great number of Roman Catholics in Latin America, but the sparsity of priests to serve them. So he asked again, it was just a general letter to most communities in the United States. Again, the Edmundites responded, and we went, in fact, a classmate of mine, Father Marcel Rainville, who's now the formation director, he went to Venezuela, but in the middle of the 60s, 1964, the same time the civil rights struggle was going on here in the United States, the Edmundites were going to Caracas, Venezuela. We established two parishes, a very poor parish and a more well-established parish. And the idea was to help the more well-off parish take care of the poverty. And in Latin America, especially in Caracas, where we have been since the 60s, there was hardly any middle class. It was mostly very poor versus very well-off. And part of our mission there, and what was striking there is the people that went there were older Edmundites. And at least one of the founding members, Father Armand Kucher, Father Larry Lyons was another. And these men were, even though they were well along in their own years, didn't hesitate to learn a new language in order to go. Sure. And so our history has been really one of going where God needs us. And at the time, we've been responsive to many things. We until Katrina really put kind of a death nail on. We had a wonderful nativity model school, Bishop Perry Middle School. Two of our men, Father Dave Theroux, Father Dave Cray, and Mr. Ken White, for many years worked very diligently. And one of the early graduates of this middle school, nativity model school, and went to St. Michael's. Here he is, an African-American young man. St. Michael's have some African-Americans back when he came. Within the first week, he was elected president of his class, and by his senior year, he was elected to be the president of the Student Association. Tyrone Walker is his name. A wonderful black young man who was a product of our ministry in New Orleans. And it was a wonderful opportunity. Where I'm trying to say is that our history has been a series of, I think, providential opportunities by God pulling us into areas where the need has been greatest. If I could focus more on what currently is going on with the Edmundite missions, our work there has very much centered on Matthew 25, feeding, clothing, sheltering, and educating the poor.
All right. Well, thank you for giving us that background. We have to take a break now, okay, but we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. We want to get questions from our studio audience and your questions and your comments. So please stay with us. Thank you. We have a really nice audience here tonight. Nice big group of folks that came from New York and New Jersey, as well as folks from scattered other parts of Michigan and North Carolina and other states, Texas. And we'd love to have you come and join us. So if you can come here on pilgrimage, please do so. Contact our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966. That's 205-271-2966. Or go to our website, www.ewtn.com. Also, want to mention to you that EWTN's 30th anniversary family celebration is going to be July 23rd to the 24th, right here in Birmingham, Alabama. If you are able to come and join us to be part of the Mass, the talks, a lot of the hosts are going to be coming down for this because it's a big anniversary for us, 30 years of being on the air. So for more information about this, go to www.ewtn.com. You can find information there, or you can call 205-271-2989, 205-271-2989, and they'll help you to get information. Now, the tickets are free. You don't have to worry about pre-ordering. Just come on down, and we'd be glad to have you downtown in Alabama. Father, you ought to come there too, now that you've been on the show. Are you ready for some questions?
I am.
All right, let's start off with a call. We have Sharon on the line. Hello, Sharon.
Hello.
Hi, where are you from?
I'm originally from Elmira, New York.
Oh, great. You're a hometown girl.
See?
All right, and what is your question?
I was wondering if Father Myhalyk could tell us how many Edmundite members are working now in Selma.
How many are working in Selma?
There are 3 of us in Selma.
Three. So
There's Father Stephen Hornet, who's originally from Hartford, Connecticut. Father Stanley Drzinski, who is originally from Windsor, Connecticut. And Father Steve is the pastor of Queen of Peace Parish, which is the church that was created in 1971 when they merged the black parish, which was St. Elizabeth, with Assumption Parish, the white parish, into one church. And Father Drzinski has just come from the north to assume a new assignment as Director of Pastoral Care and Evangelization. And he'll be working, doing parish missions and helping to spread the word about our work in Alabama and New Orleans.
Okay, good. We have a question here from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey, Father.
New Jersey. What town in New Jersey?
Hillside.
Hillside. Okay, good to have you here. And what is your question?
I'd like to know, Father, more about Saint Edmund and how it is that an English saint inspired French folks to begin an order. What was it about Saint Edmund that provided
question.
the inspiration?
That's a very good question.
Okay, well, first of all, Edmund's dates. Edmund is a saint who dates back to, he was Archbishop of Canterbury in the year 1234. And before he was the Archbishop of Canterbury, he was a student, he both studied and taught at Oxford and Paris, and in his procession to becoming Archbishop of Canterbury, he also had served as treasurer of Salisbury Cathedral at a time it was being built. So he has a history. He also preached the Sixth Crusade. So he is a saint from the 1200s. How did he end up being the Edmundite patron? The Cistercian Abbey where we were founded, it was customary as people would travel on their way to Rome from England, that they would go through the area in which we were founded. And this Cistercian Abbey was a very favorite place for Edmund to stop on his way to visit, to make his visit to the Pope periodically to report on the affairs of the English Church. And as he had frequented the Pontini Abbey, the Cistercian Abbey, he loved the Cistercians. He asked to be buried there as he was dying. He fell sick on his final visit on his way to Rome. And so he is buried in the church where we ended up being founded. Also, if you were to visit Pontigny, you would see that there's a wonderful statue of Mary, where at the base of the statue are some of the saints of the contemporaries of Edmund. St. Dominic, St. Francis are two of his contemporaries, and within about 3 or 4, 5, 6 years of each other, those three individuals were canonized in the what was probably around the early times the canonization was done in a formal way in our church. So Edmund really did not found us, but the Edmundites were originally referred to as the Oblates of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And our primary, before we became a religious congregation, our founder urged us to have charity, the virtue of charity, as our primary focus. And so that the heart of Jesus and Mary were part of our charism. But we became known as the Fathers and Brothers of St. Edmund because Edmund's body is enshrined in a tomb above the main altar in this Cistercian Abbey church. So very early on, people would refer to us as the Fathers of St. Edmund. And just as St. Anne's Shrine on Lake Champlain is a place of pilgrimage, the early style of the Edmundites helping people to come back to the faith was very much predicated on a whole sense of pilgrimage. So just as you welcome your audience to try to come here to celebrate your anniversary, the Edmundites would welcome pilgrims to Pontigny, and they would use it as a time to preach, a whole conversion of soul, a whole revitalization. When Pope John Paul II talked about evangelization, he talked about pre-evangelization, evangelization, and a post-evangelization. And so it was very much not only bringing people back into a revitalization, but also then nurturing that faith. So Edmund's spirituality, I suppose, was there because he was seen as a saint of integrity. Our symbol on our cross that we wear, it's not Order of St. Oswald, it looks like OSO. Though Edmund took a ring on his finger and took a second ring and placed it on the statue of Our Lady as a way of showing his consecration and commitment to God in a permanent way and his perpetual chastity. So we have him as our patron. He was not our founder, however.
Okay. We have another caller, Sharon. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, where are you from?
I live in Indianapolis.
Great. And what's your name? What's your question?
Well, I just have a comment. I grew up in Mobile County in the 50s and 60s, and we had the Edmundites there, and I joined the church at 9.5, was prepared for baptism and baptized by Father John Pero. Our family was also very close to Father Willette, and I'm just very appreciative of the Edmundites coming to help us in the Deep South during that period of time and continue to help it also now. And that's all really I wanted to say.
Oh, well, thank you for that comment. I appreciate that very much.
There's some interesting stories. When Father Willette was stationed on Dolphin Island, he used to shoot snakes. That was one of the things that they had a lot of snakes down there. But we had another one of our priests, Father Edward Conlon. He was quite a character and a joker, and he used to talk about being stationed overseas. And what he meant by that was he worked at St. Edmunds by the Sea church on Dolphin Island before the bridge was built. So he could say he was a missionary who was overseas. But for many years, the Edmundites had a string of parishes. Even to this day, I was privileged to go back to the place where I served as pastor, Our Lady of Lourdes, for their 70th anniversary recently. And many of the people from Our Lady of Lourdes in fact, there's also a wonderful parish, Good Shepherd Parish in Huntsville. Parishes in both the Diocese of Birmingham and Archdiocese of Mobile are very much involved with helping the Edmundite missions with clothing and food and donations and stuff. And it's a wonderful wonderful reflection of how people have taken seriously that as they have transitioned from being mission churches into full parishes, that's a real wonderful realization of giving back to the church.
Sure.
And so that caller really taps that. The other thing I'm very conscious of is the proportion of Catholics. Here in the Diocese of Birmingham, 3% of the population is Catholic, where Mobile is 4% Catholic. So even if you're a white Roman Catholic, you're a minority. And how do you survive in an area which sometimes where the preaching in other churches is very anti-Catholic? So evangelization many times is that persistent presence of us doing our job and reflecting what the church has always been about. The early rule of the Edmundites is taps the 4 marks of the church. 1, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And Father Muart, our founder, said, people will really look to you more as a result of seeing you as a holy person than all the words you're going to say from the pulpit. And when he talked about zeal and that being an apostle and what it meant, today if you work with African Americans, we talk about knowing who you are and whose you are, meaning, I am sent to be an apostle, someone who is sent to bring the good news, the gospel to them. But I'm not representing myself. I'm bringing God to others. And when we do that, we really evangelize in a very powerful way, because suddenly people see that Jesus Christ still walks this earth because other people are continuing to live out the gospel and what he preached.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from our studio audience. Father, where are you from?
My name is Father Tom Hoare. I'm an Edmundite from St. Edmund's Retreat in Mystic, Connecticut.
Are you here to keep an eye on him?
I am. They sent me down. The Superior General sent me down to watch him. But I wanted, Father Dick, if you could talk about how the Edmundite missions in the South here were really built on a foundation of prayer, and how the Edmundite community invited the Carmel to come and to build a foundation of prayer in order that all the good works that the community would do would be rooted in prayer, and not just be secular humanists doing good works, but really evangelizers and people who were bringing the message of Christ out of a position of prayer.
One of the things that Father Casey and Father Perro did on their way traveling from Vermont to Selma, Alabama, they came in, I think it was a Pontiac station wagon with $50 in their pocket. And so they didn't have, of course back then there was no interstate highways, and there was no motels of any great moment set up. They very much relied upon staying in rectories and convents, not convents, but they stay in rectories. But as they were coming down, they would very often stop and speak with the sisters in various places. One of those stops was the Philadelphia Carmel, where the sisters of the Carmelite monastery there were very much taken with Father Casey's concern that the success of the missions was not going to happen unless it had the support and the prayers of folks. And even today, besides looking for financial contributions, I'm always struck by the number of our benefactors who talk about how they pray for the missions daily. And Father Casey saw that as a critical piece, and he invited the Carmel in Philadelphia to come to the Archdiocese. Well, at the time, the whole state of Alabama and the Panhandle of Florida were one enormous diocese, and the Panhandle has become Pensacola. But at the time, he brought back in 1943, which is about 6 years into our existence, a group of Carmelite nuns from Philadelphia who created in Mobile the Carmel Monastery. And even today, I try to visit them, not as frequently as I used to. I was their chaplain when I was stationed at Our Lady of Lourdes. And recently, Archbishop Rodi, who is the Archbishop of Mobile, was instrumental in bringing a group of, I believe, 8 or 10 sisters from Vietnam, from a Carmel over there, where there's a wonderful liveliness of vocations coming into the church. And so these women from Vietnam who are fully professed Carmel have come to fill the Carmel Monastery in Mobile. But those sisters have prayed for the success of the Edmundite missions well back into the 40s, almost from our beginning. And it has served us well. I also should underscore that not only the prayer of these sisters, but much at a time when the number of Edmundites is challenged, we have relied very heavily upon women religious from, I've already mentioned the Sisters of St. Joseph of Rochester. We also have the Sisters of St. Joseph Carondelet from St. Louis. We have IHMs. We have sisters from the Order of St. Francis. In fact, the former president of the Sisters of St. Francis was good friends with Mother Angelica when she was the principal of a high school here in Birmingham. And she is now working in Mosses, Alabama, Lowndes County, where every month she helps distribute 300 bags of food, and we have mobile pantries that come periodically to help offset the severe unemployment that exists in that area. But sisters in general are a tremendous part of our ministry, and they help sustain the presence of the church, and they're recognized as holy women who are signs and symbols of what we're trying to let people know that the church cares about their plight and that they're not alone.
Sure. We have another question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
I'm from Jonesboro, Arkansas, and Cape Girardeau,
Good to have
Missouri.
you here. Welcome, and what is your question?
Well, Father, it seems like there's been the beginning of a resurgence in vocations. At least I hope. I haven't seen any statistics. I hope that's the case and not just wishful thinking. And I was wondering what your experience in your order has been, if you're seeing an increase in vocations to your order.
Yes. First of all, probably one of the most challenging things has been the vocation situation in the church. During my tenure, I had 2 terms as head of our order, and during that time, unfortunately, we did not have any persevering vocations, and yet I felt that it was important to really prepare for the time when someone would be joining us, and I took the bold step of sending away Father Marcel Rainville to be trained in formation work. And shortly after I left office, 2 men joined us. And one is from our parish in Caracas, Venezuela. The other is a graduate of our college, St. Michael's College in Colchester, Vermont. And both of those men have went through their formation year in the novitiate and have now taken their vows. I understand that we have another young man about to begin his novitiate. So while there were lean times, that has, I think, begun to shift. The other thing I would say, I was privileged to, Bishop Baker is the former of this diocese, is the former ordinary of Charleston, South Carolina. I had a wonderful opportunity to work with the students of Charleston College, of the colleges in that state, with a good friend, Mrs. Jane LaMarche, who Bishop Baker had hired to be the director of campus ministry for the state. And I was very, very intrigued with how faith-filled the students in that state, as I interacted with them in a weekend retreat, gave real strong signs of being much more likely to be committed to the church. I think the real issue is, I said when we were talking informally before the show about, I used to do statistics at our college, and I was very struck with years ago, 30 years ago, the New England states had 35,000 weddings performed in the churches of New England, Catholic churches in New England. And 5 years ago, it was only 17,500, half as many. So not only has there been a challenge for commitment to priesthood and religious consecrated life, but I think there's also a real challenge to married couples to make a lifelong commitment. And I think it's symptomatic, and I think the light is at the end of the tunnel. I hope it isn't the locomotive coming straight at us. But
no, I think
you're
right.
I mean, we have to be hope-filled, and we can be our own worst enemy. If we believe that there's no hope and we don't have faith. I mean, it's God's church, and God assured us that there was going to be. I'm very, when I interact with our students at the college we founded, even though there are not a lot of our Edmundites left teaching there and doing when I was a student, I think when I look at the young people that are running mobilization of volunteer efforts, when I look at the people involved with peace and justice, we had we maintain our archives of my community at our college, and there's a civil rights class that came down to Alabama from St. Michael's during what would normally be spring break for everybody else is going to places in Florida to have a wild time. We had students who were committed to coming to Alabama to experience firsthand what it was like to go through the civil rights struggle, to see what they had studied and read in our archives. And I just think of so many of the people that have gone through the mobilization of volunteer efforts at that college that have ended up getting involved with real worthwhile organizations like Hope House out on Long Island or Covenant House in New York, giving their lives to causes which don't look for a lot of income, but are very much taken up with really being in solidarity. What the church says in Gaudium Spes, the joys, the hopes, the griefs, the anxieties of the people of this age, and especially the poor and anyone who are really suffering, those are the joys, the hopes, the anxieties, and the griefs of the disciples of Christ. That living in solidarity, and when you suddenly start doing that, commitment, I think, takes care of itself.
Well, we have just a couple of minutes left. We have one more question. Sir, where are you from?
A native of Windsor, Vermont.
Windsor, Vermont. And what's your question?
Father, you said that the primary reason for coming to the South was to evangelize. What types of ministries are the missions involved in today and serving the poor?
I say we have only about 2 minutes left. So what are some of the things that you're doing?
Probably, especially friends of the Edmundite missions, I haven't done enough about that. Our ministry very much is taken with feeding, clothing, sheltering, evangelizing, and educating the poor. Maybe the couple of very quick stories of people we've helped that I think just strike me. A woman, we'll call her Mary. We wrote about her. We write letters almost monthly, certainly monthly, even more frequently, to tell people about our efforts. We post them on our website. Mary was a woman who was living in poverty. She gets an income of less than $600 a month, of which she was spending $200 or $300 on a hovel. When I call it a hovel, there was a crack in her roof in the kitchen. We helped her. Right. We feed her at Bosco. She picks up aluminum cans and takes those and brings them and sells them for the pounds that she gets in order to have added income. That's the type of person that we've helped. There's a mother who had a child die a crib death. Her 5-year-old daughter was killed tragically in a car accident, hit on a bicycle. And then her teenage son, trying to save another kid from drowning, drowned himself. She lost all 3 of her children, and we helped her bury her son. And this mother, she wasn't Catholic, and she came to me and she started crying. She said, I can't believe that your church would do this for me.
But that's what we do.
And that's what Pope Pius XI, he wanted us to be a presence. And I think that's a presence. Now, we don't do that alone. We do it because people help us.
Right. All right, well, thank you very much for being here. I'm afraid we've run out of time. I just want to mention that you can go to www.edmunditemissions.org to find out more about their work and their missions. And if you would join me in giving a blessing, may Almighty God bless you and keep you and cause His face to shine upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And, we can bring Father Myhalyk and all the other guests who come on the network because this network is brought to you by you. You make it possible with your donations to EWTN. So we're going to ask you to please keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill so that we can pay all of our bills. And it's been a little bit rough this summer, so we really appreciate a little extra help if you can do it. Or if everybody gives a little bit, that'll help a whole lot too. God bless you and thank you very much.